Welcome to The Final Descent, Air Crash Investigations, the podcast that delves into the chilling realities behind aviation disasters. I'm your host, Russell, and in each episode we'll dissect the intricate details of a different air crash, exploring the human drama, technical failures, and the often unforeseen chain of events that lead to tragedy. Join me as we unravel the mysteries of the sky, seeking answers and ultimately, understanding. In today's episode, we journey to Cairns, Australia, where a late-night helicopter joyride turned into a fatal plunge into a 7-story hotel. In the early hours of August 12, 2024, the tranquility of Cairns, Queensland, was shattered. At approximately 1:51 a.m., a Robinson R-44 helicopter, registration VHERH, collided with the roof of a 7-story hotel. The impact was devastating. The helicopter, reduced to wreckage, erupted in flames, a fiery spectacle against the night sky. The hotel, scarred and damaged, bore witness to the sudden tragedy. The pilot, the sole occupant of the helicopter, was tragically killed. Miraculously, despite the significant damage to the building, none of the hotel's occupants were injured. The sudden crash and subsequent fire sparked immediate emergency response, bringing a chaotic scene of sirens and flashing lights to the otherwise quiet city. Initial reports painted a picture of a joyride gone horribly wrong, a late-night flight that ended in a fatal descent. But as investigators began to piece together the events leading up to the crash, a more complex story emerged, one shrouded in unauthorized actions and a series of decisions that defied logic and safety regulations. The pilot at the controls of VHERH was a New Zealand citizen, holding a commercial pilot license issued by the New Zealand Civil Aviation Authority. This license allowed him to fly helicopters, including the Robinson R-44, but carried a crucial limitation. Night flights were restricted to within 25 nautical miles of a lit aerodrome. He also held type ratings for the Cabri G2 helicopter and a sling endorsement, suggesting some experience with aerial work operations. His logbook revealed a total of 157.8 flight hours, a relatively modest amount. Of those hours, only 16.8 were logged in Robinson R-44 helicopters, and a mere 10.35 were flown at night, exclusively in Cabri G2 helicopters. Curiously, his last recorded flight had taken place months earlier, in February 2024, in New Zealand. He did hold a current Australian commercial pilot license as well. However, crucially, he lacked a night VFR rating, a certification essential for safe night flying, and significantly, he had never logged any flight time in an R-44 in Australia. Employed as a ground crew member since April 2024, his duties focused on the mundane but crucial tasks of ground operations, refueling, washing helicopters, and transporting passengers. The very day of the crash, he was scheduled to travel to Horn Island for a new role involving refueling aircraft, a land-based assignment far removed from the cockpit. He had passed mandatory drug screenings, but, as the investigation would reveal, a much larger issue loomed, one that would ultimately seal his fate and cast a long shadow over the tragic events of that night. The evening of August 11th began like any other for the pilot. He was seen socializing with friends at various locations in Cairns, enjoying drinks in the company of others. Witness testimonies and video recordings paint a picture of a relaxed, social evening, but also reveal a crucial detail. The pilot was consuming alcohol. The night unfolded, and around 11 p.m. he returned to his apartment. Security footage captures him walking to his vehicle at approximately 1:09 a.m. on August 12th, driving away into the darkness. Just over 20 minutes later, a chilling scene unfolds at the aircraft hangar. Surveillance cameras captured the pilot maneuvering a Robinson R-44 Raven II helicopter, registered VHERH, onto a helipad using ground wheels. He had access to the premises due to his ground crew employment. After removing the ground wheels, he entered the helicopter at 1:34 a.m. and closed the door. Moments later, the cockpit lights flicker on, and the helicopter's strobe lights start flashing. This suggests he activated the battery switch, a routine procedure. However, these lights abruptly go dark at 1:37 a.m., only to illuminate again without the strobes less than 2 minutes later. This unusual on-off sequence with the cockpit lighting continues until 1:44 a.m. Then, 8 seconds later, the main rotor starts spinning. At 1:46 a.m., the helicopter lifts off the helipad, turns left, and sets course southward toward the city center of Cairns. GPS data reveals the helicopter's path. Along a highway towards the city, a brief detour near his shared apartment, a turn back towards the coast, a flight along the shoreline, and another pass over his apartment. The helicopter's altitude never exceeded 500 feet throughout the flight. Chillingly, the GPS data abruptly ends approximately 70 seconds before the tragic collision. 2 security cameras offer the final horrifying glimpses. They show the helicopter pitching upwards, then suddenly plummeting downwards in a steep, uncontrolled descent. At approximately 1:51 a.m., the helicopter crashes into the roof of the 7-story hotel, a fiery explosion marking the final devastating moment of an unauthorized flight that spiraled into tragedy. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau launched a comprehensive investigation into the crash. The wreckage, scattered across the hotel roof and surrounding area, told a grim story. The helicopter was inverted at the point of impact, indicated by the distribution of debris and impact marks, including crucial main rotor impact marks found underneath the crash site. The force of the impact, combined with a devastating fuel-fed fire, left the helicopter utterly destroyed. Inside the hotel rooms below the crash site, investigators found disturbing evidence of the rotor's destructive power. Parts of the main rotor blades had sliced through the rooms, embedding themselves in the walls and shattering windows. The helicopter's instrument panel, GPS unit, the rotor mast, and the main rotor head were all separated from the fuselage during the violent impact sequence, scattered within the hotel grounds below. The helicopter's engine, though severely damaged by fire and impact forces, revealed key details. Marks on one of the engine oil coolers indicated that the engine and ring gear were actively rotating at the moment of impact. The damage to the main rotor blades suggested a high power setting at the time of the crash. The fuel tanks, designed as bladders, had ruptured, fueling the post-impact inferno, but the exact mechanism of their rupture remained elusive due to the extensive damage. Critically, examination of the wreckage revealed no signs of pre-existing defects or an in-flight fire that could have contributed to the accident. Air traffic control records provided another piece of the puzzle. The control tower at Cairns Airport, staffed by a single controller on the night shift, had handled a flight around 12:30 a.m. and was expecting another around 5 a.m. There were no scheduled flights in between. The controller was engaged in routine tasks and training during this quieter period. While they could take breaks, they maintained a listening watch from within the visual control room. There were no visual or audible alerts that would automatically draw attention to unscheduled aircraft activity. Instead, the controller relied on visual identification of aircraft symbols on the radar console and radio communications. Data shows the controller last interacted with their system around 1:43 a.m., close to the time the helicopter was being started. However, the helicopter only became visible on their system at 1:44 a.m. The controller reported hearing unexplained radio interference noises on multiple occasions that night, prompting checks of the system for new flight plans. This raises questions about the potential for earlier detection and the role of airport security. As a ground crew member, the pilot had access codes to the building and hangar. The larger helicopters inside prevented the hangar doors from being fully closed. The operator's standard practice was to leave keys in helicopters stored in the hangar. While regulations stipulate that unattended aircraft be secured airside, the pilot's actions, including turning off the helicopter's strobe lights, suggest a deliberate attempt to conceal the unauthorized departure, making detection even more challenging for the federal police and airport safety officers on duty that night. So, what does it all mean? The investigation painted a complex and ultimately tragic picture. While the exact reason for the pilot's decision to take flight remains unknown, the ATSB concluded there were no mechanical issues with the helicopter that contributed to the crash. This leaves us focusing on the pilot's actions and the surrounding circumstances. A significant factor was the pilot's blood alcohol content. The toxicology report showed a level that undoubtedly impaired judgment and decision-making. Combined with the late hour, the unauthorized nature of the flight, and the pilot's disregard for minimum altitude regulations over a built-up area, flying well below the mandated 1,000 feet, the risks were tragically compounded. The pilot, while commercially licensed and experienced with the Robinson R-44 helicopter type, was not authorized to fly the operator's aircraft and lacked the necessary endorsements for night flying. This unauthorized access to the helicopter, facilitated by their employment as ground crew, underscores critical security vulnerabilities at the airport. The pilot's deliberate actions to avoid detection, switching off the helicopter's strobe lights, further complicated the situation. This tragic accident highlights several important safety issues. It reinforces the critical importance of adhering to regulations, particularly regarding alcohol consumption and minimum flight altitudes. The investigation also exposes vulnerabilities in airport security procedures, particularly concerning access to aircraft and the monitoring of unauthorized flights. It serves as a sobering reminder of the potential consequences when these essential safety protocols are disregarded, reminding us that safety is not a solo act but a shared responsibility. That concludes our deep dive into the Cairns helicopter crash. This incident serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of prioritizing safety in every aspect of aviation. Thank you for joining me on Final Descent. If you found this episode compelling, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others. We appreciate your support in helping us spread awareness about aviation safety. Until next time, fly safe.